Hello, everybody. Today I have an awesome guest I want to introduce you. So her name is Shohreh Davoodi. She's a wellness coach and a writer located in Austin, Texas. She coaches clients locally in Austin as well as online. And Shohreh uses a weight-inclusive approach centered around joyful movement, intuitive eating, and body respect. When she's not helping badasses improve their relationship with exercise, food, and their bodies, she's spending time with her husband and dogs, flying high on the trapeze, that's really awesome, and living the rainbow unicorn life. Hello.
That's right. Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. How are you doing?
I am doing well, just enjoying this little holiday break that I'm taking right now.
Yes. So when we're talking, it's the 27th, so end of the year,
Yeah.
right after Christmas.
Yup.
Yeah, it's the crazy season for many of us. Especially because of some of the topics that we're going to talk about today, like eating and how to manage all the holiday food and guilt and stress and all that kind of stuff. So we're definitely going to be touching all these things. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you are doing and how are you helping women?
Absolutely. So you just gave a very lovely introduction of me, which gives the basics. So I'm a wellness coach, as you mentioned, and I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I work with mostly women, but I also work with non-binary people as well. And my sort of main goal in life here is to really help people to improve their relationships with exercise, food, and their bodies. Because what I found is that most people have a really crappy relationship with all of those things, thanks to diet culture and just growing up in a society that teaches women and femme-presenting people that they need to look a certain way and fit into these very specific boxes. So I actually started my business because I felt that people have been trying to put me into boxes my entire life and saying, oh, you need to be this thing, you need to be this thing. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, we don't have these same expectations for men. I should be allowed to be a multifaceted person, and I should be able to like whatever I like and not like whatever I don't like, and not feel like I have to do certain things because everyone else is telling me that I need to do them. So it's kind of my inspiration for starting my wellness coaching business. And obviously that can take many different routes. It could be life coaching or something like that. But I have been really into strength training myself for over a decade now. And that's kind of what got me thinking about going down this particular path.
That's all super powerful. How you mentioned that I don't have to belong in a certain box. I can do whatever I want. I can eat the way I want, do what I like. I think it's so important, and more women need to hear it and understand it and have the support from other women. Tell us, what's your personal story? Why are you so interested in food and fitness and helping others with these issues they have around these topics?
Yeah, so my personal story is very interesting and kind of just has a weird background in the sense that my career path was actually, I went to school for music performance, and I used to play the oboe, for those who know what that is. Many people don't know what that is. And I did that for college, and post-college, I took some time off, and then I ended up going to law school because I didn't really know what else to do at the time. I had an arts degree. We were just coming out of the recession, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I had some friends in law school who are like, oh, you'll be great at this. Like, you're a really good writer and speaker, and, you like to read. I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. So I went to law school, and I loved law school. I have a lot of wonderful friends from law school, but post law school, I hated being a lawyer. Absolutely hated it. I was one of those people who woke up every day, like, just dreading going to work. And I only lasted, just under a year and a half as a lawyer before I was like, I need to get out of here. And at that point, I kind of really reached a point where I was like, I really can't imagine myself working for somebody else. Like, I was very interested in starting a business, which was interesting to me because I was never like an entrepreneurial person before that. I'd never thought about starting a business or had any ideas for starting a business. But my older brother is actually a strength and conditioning coach. And he kind of inspired me. He's the one who got me into strength training in the first place back in college. And I had kind of become the person among my friends that they would go to for exercise and nutrition advice. And I was like, I'm already kind of doing this for people and I really like it. And I was a big avid follower of Girls Gone Strong, which most people know of. And I loved their message about how women can take up space and like, it's okay to have muscles and all this stuff. And so that was kind of my initial thought, was like, I want to spread that message to more women. Not enough women are hearing this. We're still very much in this land of like losing weight is the only option. And so that was my initial kind of thought. And from there, it's really just expanded out, and I've really found my own voice in my business. Whereas like I first started out as just like, you're pretty typical personal trainer who like, yeah, I'll help people with fat loss, but I want to also teach people like, to love their bodies and to be okay with muscle, to now, I've really taken a lot more of a social justice bent in my work. And with the fact that weight inclusivity is really important to me, and making sure that fitness is accessible to not just thin people, but people in larger bodies, people with different skin colors, people who make different amounts of money, really helping to make wellness in general more accessible and less of a privileged thing. So that's a very long-winded way of telling you how I ended up where I am now.
No, it's all good. It's all very interesting, especially the backstory, like becoming a lawyer and then hating it and then following your passion and doing what you really want to do. So what kind of people So what kind of people are you working with right now? What kind of problems they have and they come to you, hey, can you help me with this?
Yeah, so most people that I'm seeing now are at a point where they're ready to put sort of weight loss and, body aesthetic changes, the specifics of that on the back burner, which doesn't mean that they may not experience those things when we're working together. Some people that does happen, but they're willing to say, I'm not going to make this my main focus anymore because I've been trying to focus on this for however many years. For some of my clients, maybe it's just a few years. For others of them, it's been decades where they've been yo-yo dieting and they have been, either they hate exercise or like when they exercise, they just burn themselves into the ground because they don't know how to have like some kind of happy medium relationship with exercise. They've hated their bodies and like they've just been pursuing this. I have a lot of Weight Watchers clients, people who did Weight Watchers for years and years. They're people who've tried every fad diet that's ever existed. And these are people who've basically reached the point where they're fed up and they want to try something different, which does not mean that they're like confident about that, right? Usually they come in and they're kind of terrified and they're like, all right, I'm going to try something new because what I've been trying hasn't been working, but also I'm totally scared and I don't necessarily believe this is going to work, but what do I have to lose at this point? And so mainly I'm seeing people who are coming in who want to get away from that dieting and who are usually they have like a big disconnect between them and their bodies. And so they want to kind of bring that connection back, learn what it is that they want instead of what the world is telling them that they need to want, and coming back into their bodies through exercise. Strength training is the modality that I use with my clients, and it's a great way to kind of start to reconnect and come back into your body for people who have disconnected from their bodies either because of dieting or because of trauma or other things that have happened in their lives. And also getting to a point of not necessarily body love. I don't think that I think that's a nice thought, and a lot of my clients maybe would like that to be a long-term goal of like striving to love their bodies. But I think even those of us who have a really great relationship with our bodies wouldn't say that every single day we wake up and we're just like in love with our bodies. It's more about helping them get to a point of respecting their bodies. That's really important to me. And being like, you don't even have to like your body to show it respect, right? Is a general rule when we think about other people, like we can hate other people and still be respectful towards them. And that same thing works for our bodies. So showing them the tools for like, okay, even if you don't like your body today or some part of it or whatever, what choices can you make that are still caring and compassionate for that body? So I think that's kind of the main thing I'm helping people with.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with you that the body love is, I think it's such a, at first it's kind of like a vague thing. What is it exactly? What does it mean? And
Right.
there's a lot of misunderstanding what it should look like. Like, should it be like admiring yourself in front of the mirror every day? It's not that. I agree. Right. It should be more about respecting and just being okay with yourself and doing the best for your body, right?
Yeah, and I think the other argument too is that like with this whole concept of trying to love your body, you know, a lot of people are like, well, isn't this just one more thing that women feel like they're not measuring up to? Because we're basically saying like, okay, well, you're not supposed to hate your body anymore. Now you're supposed to love it. And so for women who just aren't there, they're like, well, now I'm not measuring up on this either. I'm not body positive enough. And it's like, that shit doesn't matter. I mean, really what we should be doing is just getting away from our bodies entirely. Like, they're great. They're awesome. I'm grateful for my body, but this is not the most important thing about me. It's not the most important thing about anybody else. So I think really the work is in realizing that our bodies aren't that important in the grand scheme of things and that our worth doesn't come from them.
Exactly. So where do you start? If somebody comes to you, she's been typically, I believe, dieting a long time.
Yeah.
You said with exercise, there's sort of two options, whether they're totally burnt out because they've done so much, or
Yeah.
they have come to the point where they hate it. And these two can also be sort of together, right? First you did too
Yes.
much, then you learn to hate it. So where do you start when you want to balance these things out and just kind of like be normal around food and exercise?
Right. Yeah. It's a big ask if you've had sort of this disordered relationship with exercise and food for a long, long time. And it baby steps really is what I start with all my clients. For me, the first thing I do, and I'm sure you do this as well, is gathering as much information about them and their history as possible, and just learning, okay, what is your relationship with food and exercise? What have they been over time? I want to know, like, what do you like? What do you hate? Even if like that may turn out to be not exactly true, but just kind of seeing like where their mindset is at with everything right now, so that I have a really good sense of like where's a safe place to start, what might be triggering for them. So once I have that kind of information, then I'm looking at, all right, what is it that you need most right now? Kind of like triaging. And I always ask my clients, I'm like, okay, what is the number one thing that you're struggling with right now with like exercise, food, and your body? So I ask that as 3 separate questions, because that just gives me some really good information to start as far as like, okay, where do we want to start centering our efforts off the bat? Because if it's someone where like their number one struggle with exercise is, oh, I never do it, you know, I just like can't motivate myself to do it, then that's a great place to start with. Like, okay, well, let's figure out like what kind of exercise you like. Why is it not fitting into your schedule? You know, is it because you've had bad experiences in the past, and can we create new experiences around exercise that are more fun for you? So it tends to be a very individual experience. And with food, especially, one of the first things I like to do with my clients is figuring out what dieting behaviors that they are engaging in right now. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not on a diet, but in reality, they're doing a lot of dieting behaviors, even though they're not on a named diet right now. So I actually have like a list of them. And one of the first things I will often have clients do is we'll go through that list and I'll be like, okay, can you check for me like things that you're doing? And a lot of times they're like, oh, I never really thought of this as a dieting behavior. I just thought this is what people do when they eat. I'm like, oh no, actually that's like a sign of disordered eating. So bringing awareness to that piece of like, there are disordered behaviors, because a lot of times what people think of as like healthy eating is actually like a very restrictive and controlling relationship with food. And then being like, okay, of these, which feels most important to start with right now to get you started down the path of having some wins in this arena, because it takes time. You know this. You can't just reconnect to your body overnight. You have to unlearn decades worth of terrible information and wrong information. My goal is to help people get small wins around food and exercise at the beginning, knowing that it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster experience, and then trying to avoid some of those setbacks, not avoid some of the setbacks, but setbacks are going to happen. So having some positive steps at the beginning so that when we reach those setbacks, it's not like a complete explosion.
Yeah, it's not a linear progress for sure. It's not like you just, every day is going to be better and better and better until one day I've like reached this magical destination and I'm loving myself every day. It's absolutely not just like learning every other new thing or creating any other new habits. It's hard. It takes work.
It's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It takes work. One of my favorite like meme things is what you expect progress to look like, and it's like this, and then what progress actually looks like, and it's like this crazy crater puddle situation. I'm like, yeah, that's what it's like. And people just don't realize that right away. I mean, I think we're taught culturally too, like, oh, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're just going to keep getting better and better and more confident. And I'm like, that's just not how most things in life actually work.
Yeah, exactly. So right now after Christmas, I've seen so many people, and we had like a, family dinners, family lunches, things like that. And
Mhm.
then even there, people kind of before they sit down to eat, it's almost like an absolutely necessary thing to say, I know I shouldn't be, but I think like this is one
Yeah.
of these things that you mentioned. It's just like sneaks in there without us even realizing that I just said it.
Hmm.
I'm thinking to myself, like, are you trying to justify eating this piece of ice cream cake? You don't have to justify that. So I feel
Right.
like these are things what you were talking about. Do you have other examples of things that people don't even realize that are totally like a dieting talk without them realizing that it is?
Yeah, I think in general, most of our talk around food in our culture is diet talk, and
Yeah.
people just don't understand that it is. Because normal, like healthy talk around food is things like describing our food and being like, oh, that was a really delicious meal, or maybe I didn't really like that meal very much, or, describing the taste or the texture or the colors, or, maybe saying like, oh, that was really satisfying, or oops, I ate a little too much and I'm full. Like, things like that are pretty neutral descriptors of your experience with food. Anything else outside of that is pretty much like going to be diet culture talking. So like you said, when people are like trying to justify what they're eating at the holiday meal, like, oh, I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to, or like, I'm going to do it because I ran earlier today, right? There's always this like equating exercise and eating as like playing off of each other, which is not a wonderful thing to do. And, any kind of talk about exercise as being good or being bad, and in eating food as being good or being bad, we use all of this language of morality constantly around food. We say like this dessert is sinful. And it's like, how is the dessert sinful? Like, did you murder somebody? Like, that has nothing to do with this. Like, it's a piece of food and you can choose to eat it or you cannot choose to eat it, but it doesn't say anything about you morally. And we live in this culture that basically has set up all of our choices around wellness to be like a moral imperative. And it's not. We each get to make our own choices in our own lives. And like, health is not a requirement to be a worthy human being and to like be allowed to exist. But our culture is really obsessed with healthism and like trying to say like, this is, you have to do these things, otherwise we won't respect you. And that's just not okay.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're actually not even talking about health. These
Right,
messages we're
exactly.
getting, they have nothing to do with health. Like, who says that losing weight is always healthier for you? There's plenty
Right.
of examples where it is not healthier thing for you to do. So,
Exactly. Right.
yeah.
That's the other part of the problem is like usually almost always in our cultural definition of health is the idea that like you need to be thin. And if you're not, the only way you can be seeking health is by seeking to be thin. And that's just not true.
Yeah, exactly. So, next thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you think about physique goals? Like, are they okay to have? Because I know there's a lot of body positivity movement that's right now that's saying that you should never have like, physique goals, and it's a bad thing to have. And if you have these goals, there's something wrong with your self-worth. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on that?
So I have, from having been a lawyer in the past, I can tell you that I've learned a lot about gray areas and that I don't think the world is black and white. So I am not someone who will come out on the side of like, it is always 100% and forever wrong to want to have physique goals, right? Because there's definitely times where that's not going to be 100% wrong and it makes sense for an individual. I think bodily autonomy is really important in that people get to make their own decisions for their bodies regardless of what I think. But as far as my opinion about it, I think that I don't think they're always wrong, but I think that 99% of the time, for most people, they're coming from the wrong place. So a lot of times people have things that they really need to unpack before they are seeking out physique goals. So a lot of us have internalized fat phobia because of the culture that we grew up in. And it's nobody's fault, but that's something that you really have to sit and deal with. Like, are you seeking out physique because you have a fear of fat? And if so, like, that's something that you're going to need to sit and deal with. Are you seeking out physique because you feel like it's going to give you something like self-worth or love or money? Any of those things, if you're trying to get a physique to get those things. I can tell you none of those things are on the other side of changing your physique. And when we're focusing so much on changing our physique, we forget that, you know, there's all this whole other world out there of things that we could be focusing on. I think for the average person, that probably physique goals shouldn't be the main focus. You know, I think, like, when I think of myself, for instance, the reasons why I strength train, you know, I strength train, one, because it really helps me with my trapeze to like have a built up area of strength. It helps me when I want to hike or do other things in my life. I know that it's really helpful for my heart and for my blood pressure, all these wonderful reasons that have nothing to do with my physique. But also, you know, what's like a really nice cherry on top of the fact that I strength train is that, like, I get muscles, and I think that's cool. And I think it's like a neat way to see what my body is doing. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, when I do this thing, like, because of my genetics, I get these muscles. That's awesome. So I think if you can get to a point where you see this as like the extra part of it, and it's like, oh, that's awesome. And, you know, if you want to train specific areas because you're like, oh, it's kind of nice to have something, like, I think good for you. Like, that's fine. But I think most people just have so much stuff they need to unpack first about why they want their bodies to look a certain way and why they're choosing to manipulate them. And I just think most people haven't done that work, and that there's always kind of more work to be doing around that as we're learning more and we're kind of seeing more about what the culture has shown us. So, you know, most people, I don't think that's a great place to start necessarily. I think there's a lot of other work to do first. And I know it's kind of like a wishy-washy answer, and people kind of like want to hear like, is it a yes or is it a no? But and if I had to say it, I guess I would say that, like, most people, probably not something that they should be focusing on, at least until they've done some inner work and some unlearning to figure out if that's what they want to be doing. But I can't say that it's always wrong, especially when you think of like athletes or other people who like literally compete based on the way that their bodies look. You know, it's not for me to say whether I think that's overall like a healthy or unhealthy thing to do. But if that's what you're going to do, obviously you have to work on physique goals. If you're literally going to get paid or win a competition based on whether you can get your body to look a certain way, that's a choice that you've made. So obviously that's something you're going to do. So yeah, I think it's kind of like a weird thing. And I'm sure you agree. It's like, it's really hard to come out as black or white on that. I think it can, of course, be super problematic, but it depends on the individual and it depends on their reasons.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of this gray area that you're talking about. And I think it's true in pretty much every aspect in life. You just, like, black and whites and extremes, they get you results quickly. Yes, they do. But then you also crash quickly after that. So it's better to be somewhere in the middle. And I don't think it's a wrong thing to want to change your body, but you're right. If it starts from the wrong place, if it starts from a place of like, you know, desperation or like thinking that you're getting something because you look better, then it's wrong. And I'd like to add that, you know, my personal story with hypothalamic amenorrhea and total burnout when I was so tired from physical exercise, that was actually my only choice. Like, I had to stop. And then once I was, you know, feeling well enough to get back to working out, I decided that I'm only doing it for my health. Like, whatever I do, only as much as I have to kind of keep my body healthy, to keep my muscles working, you know, things like that. And I put like all physique goals in back burner, like completely. And that was actually what sort of helped me to find this really awesome place where I'm right now, where I'm really doing the things that I love. And there has been a little bit of physique change, but I haven't really tried. It hasn't been my goal.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, is it's like, most people, if you're going to strength train, you're going to see some physique change. Like, you don't have to be striving for it necessarily to see it happen. It's kind of like, so I do trapeze, as I mentioned earlier. And most people who do aerial arts find that they end up developing a lot of upper body muscle because it's so much upper body work. So people come in, not like me, who have no strength training background, and all of a sudden they have like lats and biceps and stuff like that. Yeah. Like, whoa, this is so cool. And they didn't go into it trying to get lats and biceps. It was just like a fun side effect of the fact that they're doing this thing that they love. So, you know, for me as a coach, like, I don't take clients who are like, yeah, my goals are like this, and this physique change. I'm like, cool. I'm not a coach who does that. there's a ton of coaches out there you can go to if you specifically want that. But for me personally, I've decided I don't want that to be the main part of my coaching practice, because like you, I found that most people, if it's like, if it happens, cool, but like there's so many other wonderful benefits to be focusing on, that that's just a better use of people's time in my experience.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. So let's talk about restrictive dieting also a little bit, because these and overexercising usually go hand in hand, right? Because we want our results quickly. We want to do this black and white thing, right? Just like, let's work out hard. Let's eat as little as possible, and then we get skinny. So of course there's a lot of side effects that may come with it, such as fatigue and loss of period and all insomnia, all these kinds of things. So how would you help somebody who has this background and now has realized that it's time to change something? I've been underfueling my body for a long time, maybe eating like 1,200 calories. How do you start reversing it? What do you do?
Yeah. So I think I'll just first throw out the disclaimer that like, if this person has been under eating to a point where it could be classified as an eating disorder, then I would refer them out to somebody whose specialty is eating disorders. I do work with a lot of clients who've had disordered eating, but if they're kind of in the throes of eating disorder behaviors, then I usually will refer out to a anti-diet dietitian or a therapist who specializes in that, because I don't personally have the training to deal with eating disorders. But if it's someone who's really just been kind of dieting and it's not at that point where I would consider it an eating disorder, then again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the first things I'm looking at is, okay, what are all these behaviors that you've been engaging in? And if the main thing is like just under eating for so long, I think one of the key pieces is figuring out why this is happening for them. Like, what is some of these underlying reasons? Because what I've learned is that it's never actually about the food. There's a lot of other stuff that's going on under the surface. And so it's really helpful to kind of figure out, what was this a reaction to? Because the under eating is the symptom, it's not the disease. And finding out, what has been going on in this person's life. Like for some people, under eating is a control thing. It's an issue of control, or they maybe things in the rest of their life they don't have control over. And so they're trying to control their eating. Maybe there was a breakup or a family incident or stuff at their work is terrible. They're too busy to eat. I have a lot of clients who have very, very stressful jobs and they just don't eat for long hours at a time. And maybe they just barely eat during the week, and then they'll binge at night or on the weekends. And they're like, I don't understand why I can't stop eating when I'm binging. Because they're not fueling their body at all, during the day. So figuring out kind of where these gaps are, why we're not eating, and then taking the next steps to bring more food into their life in a way that feels comfortable to them. Because obviously it's really scary to go from, hey, I've been eating 1,200 calories a day for the last 5 years, to, hey, let's eat 2,400 calories and literally double that amount, right? Most people, they're not going to do that. They're going to freak out. So figuring out, okay, where are the gaps and how can we fill them in? So for example, I have a client right now who's an attorney, and we discovered that she was just not eating at all during the day. And so we started, I actually had her start setting an alarm to check in with herself, because she's really kind of lost any sense of her hunger, and to say like, am I hungry? And to start testing, like eating something. And, she reported back like, wow, I feel so much better when I eat something in the middle of the day. Like I have all this energy, like I can work better, and like I can come into my workouts and do better. So it's really about just like small changes at a time. I think if you try to overhaul everything at once, then it's too much like a diet, and they're just going to freak out and they're not going to be able to do it. It's about like, let's take some baby steps. Let's see where we can make changes to give you more fuel, give you more energy, and go from there. Because that's what it's really about. Is I'm usually like, okay, so what are the concerns that you're having? And it's usually, maybe they can't sleep, they're low energy, they're binging, all these other things. I'm like, okay, so let's take some steps so you can see results with those issues. And then that's a really like affirming thing for them. If they're like, oh my God, when I eat during the day, I don't binge at night, they're going to keep continuing to eat during the day, because they're like, oh, this fixed this problem that I was having. I didn't see the connection between. So trying to find where those connections are, I think, is really important, to show them like, hey, now when you eat, like it had this positive effect. And that's what we want to see, is have those positive effects that are recurring, so that we can start to lose that fear of, if I eat more, you know, these horrible things will happen to me.
Mm. Yeah. So you briefly touched binge eating too. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you think? There are a lot of people who are struggling with binge eating, just like
Yeah.
totally uncontrollable, including me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then my main issue was just undereating and exercising way too much.
Yeah.
But there are people who say that I literally can't eat like one brownie or one cookie, and they
Mm-hmm.
think that they have a thing that they label as food addiction. So what do you think?
Right.
Is food addiction a thing or no?
So the science that I've seen on this, and I've been reading a lot of it lately, says that we don't have any evidence for food addiction right now. Not in the way that we think of things like cocaine addiction or alcohol addiction. It just does not work the same. Our brains do not have that capacity to literally be addicted to food. That being said, I'm not discounting that it can feel that way to people. I understand that it can really and truly feel addicting and like you cannot stop. But what the science shows is that we can't divorce like the addictive behaviors from restricting. That's the key in all this science, is they're like, these addictive behaviors show up when the person or the animal has been restricting whatever the addictive thing is. So most people who are finding, oh, if I eat a brownie, like I eat the entire pan, probably never let themselves eat brownies like in their normal life. And so what happens is, psychologically, when we tell ourselves we cannot have something, the desire for that thing builds up more and more. So I have a lot of clients who have told themselves, like, I can't have any sweets. And then they're like, how come when I try and have a sweet, I can't stop at just one and I eat until I'm sick? Like, because you've told yourself that you can't have any sweets. And it's just very confusing to people. And they're like, no, I don't believe that. That doesn't make any sense. But it's true. It's, you know, I jokingly call this like the white elephant syndrome, which is where if you tell someone not to think of a white elephant, the first thing that immediately pops into their head is an image of a white elephant. It's the same if you tell your body, like, hey, we don't want sugar, we're not going to eat sugar. Subconsciously in your brain, all you're going to want is sugar. And all of a sudden you're going to be like, I'm having all these cravings for sugar. And then eventually those cravings get so intense that you break down, you eat some sugar, you can't stop eating the sugar. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because all of a sudden you're like, see, this is why I have to restrict the sugar, because I'm addicted to it. Reality, you're just stuck in a cycle. So one of the things I help clients do, and this is not like something I usually do right off the bat with a new client, because can be a really scary process, is reintroducing foods that they have been restricting. And I do this in a way that feels safe to them. So for someone who's like really scared about it, it might mean that we're going to try the food together in a session. Maybe they're going to try it out at a restaurant first. It doesn't mean like, hey, if you haven't let yourself eat Oreos, I want you to go buy like hundreds of them and fill your house with them. Like, it's not a great starting place for most people. It's too scary, and it's like setting them up for failure. So there's a lot of smaller steps you can take kind of leading up to that, to take that restriction away and start to teach your brain, hey, I can have this food whenever I want. Because really that's, I think, the key to most binge eating, is giving unconditional permission to eat, which most people hear that and they're like, oh, that's like gluttony, and like people will just eat whatever they want. But the reality is, like, if you can get to a point where you will choose the Oreo about as many times as you're going to choose the apple or the carrot, it's not going to have any special power anymore over you, because you're just going to be like, oh yeah, this is one food that I can choose to have. So for me, I think that's like a big key to binge eating, is really trying to remove that restriction and psychologically teaching your brain that all foods can fit into your diet, and this certain food is not going to kill you. It's not addicting.
Yeah. But I think I totally agree with you, but I think sometimes it takes a long time to get from this like crazy phase where you gave yourself this permission, now you're eating it, and then you keep wanting it and
Yes.
wanting it more and more and more. It's going to take, I don't know, what do you think, how many months or weeks before you kind of find this balance and realize that you don't want it all the time? Because at first you do really want it all the time, right?
You do. Oh, absolutely. And that's why this process is so scary for people, is because it doesn't just happen overnight. You can't magically, if you've been telling yourself something for years, decades even, like, you can't just get your brain to believe you right away. Because what's going to happen is you're going to be like, okay, now I'm allowed to eat carbs. You're going to just binge on pasta for a few weeks because your brain is like, well, maybe I'm allowed to eat carbs, but she's probably going to put me on a diet again soon. So I'm going to eat as many as I can while I'm still allowed to. So it is a process. It requires trust. And again, this is why it's not something I teach people right off the bat, because we need to be in like a good, trusting, comfortable relationship first before I can guide them through this process. But I think it does help to have a coach when you're going through this, or a therapist or a dietitian, because it's someone that when you're freaking out and you're like really wanting to start restricting or dieting again, can coach you through it and explain to you, you know, to have trust in the process and to keep going, because it's different for everybody. Some of my clients have, like, for certain foods, like had like a 2-week sort of binge and then been done, and they've been fine ever since. And other people will like have, you know, a few bad weeks and then like they're okay for a month or two and then it comes back. So it really takes time, and it takes trusting the process. And I think the key too is treating yourself kindly as you're going through the process. Because one of the big issues with binging is the whole time that people are binging is they're berating themselves and they're feeling guilty and full of shame, and like they're just horrible people for doing this. So really starting to get to a point of reinforcing more positive messages towards yourself of, yes, I'm binging. That's okay. It's part of this process. I'm trying to learn information about myself. You know, this doesn't mean I'm a bad person. I think that can make a big difference too. And I've had a lot of clients tell me like, oh yeah, even though I'm not over this food yet, I'm being a lot nicer to myself when I find myself eating it to excess. And they said that's made a huge difference for them.
Yeah, and while we are at the same time, we're led to believe that if it's not like hard, or if we are not hard on ourselves, if we are not punishing ourselves, then it's not working. You know, it's
Right.
crazy mindset that we always have to be like doing the hardest thing possible, right? Because that's the only way to see any results or whatever. But
Yeah, exactly.
it doesn't have to be like that. Okay, but now somebody tells you, okay, I believe it. I'm gonna try eating Oreos and see what happens. But I'm going to gain weight, Shohreh. What do I do now?
So for people who, you know, I think most people have this fear, right? If they start allowing themselves to eat certain foods, that they're going to gain weight. So I think the key, if you're a coach, is the first thing you're not going to do is reassure them you're definitely not going to gain weight. Because the reality is we don't know.
Yep.
We don't know. I don't know how a client's body is going to react to the process of learning to eat intuitively and starting to stop restricting. I don't know if their current body weight is lower than where their body wants to be, or if it's higher than where their body wants to be. And that's also one of the reasons why my coaching is weight inclusive and it's not weight loss focused, because people will come in and they'll say, oh yeah, well, I want to lose some weight. And I can't guarantee that. I can't guarantee that if you follow methods that I think are like nourishing and helpful for your body, that you're not going to gain weight. It could happen. I don't know. So I think the important thing there is to unpack the fear of losing weight and to say, okay, talk to me about why you're afraid of gaining weight. What would happen if you gained weight? And what would that mean for you? So really digging deeper into what that fear is, because again, it's never similar to how food is never about the food. The fear of weight gain is never about the fear of the weight itself. There's something underneath that. Either maybe they have health concerns, or they're worried about how their significant other or their family members will treat them, or how society will treat them. And that's a real fear. And those fears deserve to be acknowledged. But I think trying to say like, oh, you're definitely not going to gain weight if you do this thing, is not the way to go about it. Because the reality is that is a potential outcome of changing the way you eat. As we talked about, just like physique change is a potential outcome of exercising, weight gain or loss is going to be a potential outcome of changing the way you eat, and we just don't know the way it's going to go. So kind of trying to get to the bottom of what are the fears, and is there anything we can do to make you feel better about them or make you more comfortable sitting with those fears, and asking, is it worth it? Because it's not worth it to everybody. I think you have to have reached a point where you say, you know what, having a healthier relationship with food where I'm not obsessed with dieting and restricting is more important to me than what my weight on the scale is. And if you're not at that point, you're probably going to be unsuccessful in this experiment until you get to that point. Because as long as you're still holding up, weight loss or a specific number as the number one thing that you want, it's really hard to do this work. It's really, really hard to learn to eat intuitively, to have a healthy relationship with exercise. And that's why I don't take weight loss clients, and I will only take clients who are willing to put weight loss on the back burner. And that doesn't mean that they wouldn't like to lose weight. Most of my clients come in and they're still like, well, it'd be nice to lose weight, but they've resigned themselves to the fact that it may not happen, and they want to try something else because that's important to them. That result is more important to them.
Yes. Oh my God. That's so good. I think that's kind of the most important thing for people to understand, that this is not like weight loss is not what intuitive eating is about. It's not a weight loss guarantee. It's not supposed to be. It's not meant to be.
And if anyone's saying it is, run away in the other direction, because they're wrong.
There are people who say that, right? Because intuitive eating is kind of the cool thing right now to do. And then, people are good marketers and they market their products as like, it's really flexible. You can do this and that. It's all intuitive, but don't eat more than 1,500 calories. Just a side note here. This is
right. It's like, no. Yeah, exactly. It has become a very popular thing. And so people are co-opting the language of intuitive eating and mindful eating, and they're applying it to like typical diets or weight loss, where they're just like, use intuitive eating to manage your weight. And I'm like, has absolutely nothing to do with it. And if you're doing that, like, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And I would encourage everybody to keep their eyes open and ears open to this like potential diet talk in places where you don't think that there is diet talk, but this was a perfect example of that. It's always sneaking into everywhere. Like it's just so crazy, and we just have to become more aware of these things.
Yeah, exactly. It's really about just like keeping your eyes open and your ears open and being like, oh, that they were sneaky there, but that was actual diet culture talk.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So this has been super good. I have 3 kind of quick questions to you before we wrap it up.
Awesome.
Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. I want to know, what are 1 to 3 diet or fitness myths that you wish died for good?
Okay. Number 1, that you can spot reduce fat, because I've seen this forever, since I started, training years ago. And the people are like, oh yeah, do crunches for abs, and like do leg lifts for long and lean muscles and all this stuff. And I'm just like, guys, this is like basic science. Like, this is not a real thing. And I feel like I'm still constantly having to tell that to people, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. I'm like, okay, so we've done a really bad job. And that I blame the media for this, because they market things as being able to spot reduce, and you see it all over Pinterest too. But that's a big one for me. Number 2 would be that hunger and cravings are something to be feared. I think that we're really taught that like, oh, like we want to clamp down on our cravings, or like you can eat this thing or do this thing to stop your hunger. And whereas in reality, I think hunger and cravings are information, and we should be listening to them and learning from them. So I actually think we want to embrace them versus being afraid of them. And then lastly, number 3, I would say the myth that inside of every person in a larger body is a thin person that's like trying to claw their way out. Because it's just not true. And that is like the myth that the wellness industry perpetuates, is that like everyone should be trying to be this singular size and shape. Whereas in reality, like, we need to embrace body diversity, and we're all different shapes and sizes. And that doesn't mean that we're unhealthy.
That's a good one. I had not heard of that. The last one. There's a thin person in every big person. How'd it go? That's how it went? There's a thin person in every big person.
It's this implication that inside of every larger person there's this thin person. Like, you'll sometimes see like memes or images that show like like a silhouette of a larger person, and then inside there's like a thin person with their hands on their hips, and it's like it's used to advertise for diets and gyms and stuff like that, basically being like, oh, you can be this thin person too. And it's just like, it completely ignores the fact that like not everybody is going to be a size 0 or a size 2.
It's like a default that everybody has to want it also, right? What if somebody doesn't want it? What if I'm okay with my bigger body? Ooh, that's crazy. All right. So why don't you describe your perfect day? What does that look like?
Oh my God. Well, let's see. Right now in my life, it probably looks like sleeping in because I'm no longer a morning person. So I'd say sleeping in, going to do something active outdoors because I especially love like hiking with my dogs. So maybe it would be like a hike in the mountains. We don't have mountains in Austin, but I love places like Colorado and the Pacific Northwest that do. So probably going with my husband and the dogs on a hike, and probably eating some like really just delicious food, which for me probably means carbs because I love carbs. And that would be my like wonderful day.
What? You love carbs? Oh God.
I do. I have a client who likes to like make jokes about how much I love carbs, and I actually want to they make this tank top that's like carbivore, and it's like a little dinosaur eating like a stack of pancakes. I'm like, this was made for me.
Wow, we could probably do another episode on keto diet and limiting carbs and how cool that is.
Yeah, we could talk about that for a long time.
Yes, it's very, very popular. All right. And the last thing I wanted to ask you is, what's something that you're really loving right now?
So this is very specific to me, but I'm really loving right now is like books and articles about adults ADHD, because I was diagnosed with ADHD a year and a half ago, which was pretty deep into my 20s. And I've been unpacking like all the ways that has affected my life and what that means for me. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can, like, there are resources for this. So I started like buying books and reading articles, and it's like every minute I'm learning something new about myself. So I've been really interested in that, and I've been loving that, which is maybe a weird thing to say, but
no, that's
always fun. Cool. It's always fun to learn more about yourself, I feel like.
Yeah, learning something totally new to you, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So that has been super cool. Thank you so much for your knowledge and sharing everything.
Absolutely.
So where can people find you?
So people can find me on my website, which is www.glitterandgrit.com. And on social media, all of my handles are I am Glitter and Grit. So that's my handle on Instagram. It's facebook.com/I am Glitter and Grit. Pinterest, like that's pretty much the easiest way to find me.
All right. Everybody go check out what Shohreh is up to. And thanks so much. I will talk to you again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.